The day I was delivered to the Alpha King began with my stepmother's hands in my hair. Not gently. Never gently. Amelie Duncan's fingers worked through the tangles with sharp, efficient tugs, each pull a reminder that I was hers to groom, to present, to discard. Around us, the house hummed with preparation. Servants rushed past carrying pressed linens and polished silver, their eyes sliding away from mine as they always did. Invisible. Forgettable. Safe. Shannon, hold still. Her voice was crisp, clinical. The same tone she used when signing away livestock at market. In the corner of my room, my stepsister Ava watched from her perch on my bed, legs tucked beneath her like a satisfied cat. She wore pale pink, the color of dawn and new beginnings, her golden hair already arranged in elaborate braids studded with pearls. She looked like every painting of royal brides I'd ever seen. I looked like a funeral. The dress Amelie had chosen was gray. Not silver, not dove, gray. The color of ashes and endings. It hung from my shoulders without shape or softness, practical fabric that wouldn't show dirt during the journey. No one expected me to arrive pristine. No one expected me to arrive and matter. You should be grateful, Amelie said, her reflection meeting mine in the tarnished mirror. The Alpha King could have refused the offer entirely. Then where would this family be? Where would Ava be, she meant. Golden, precious Ava, whose future required protection. Whose life was worth bargaining for. I said nothing. I had learned years ago that silence was safer than speech, that stillness could be mistaken for obedience. My father had taught me that before he died, before the hunting accident that left too many questions and too few answers. Before Amelie's grief transformed into something colder, sharper, more calculating. They say he can't walk, Ava offered, her voice honey-sweet with false sympathy. That the war injury left him twisted. Bitter. She tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle she'd already solved. They say he hasn't left the fortress in 2 years. That he rules from a chair made of iron and spite. They say a lot of things, I replied, the first words I'd spoken all morning. Amelie's fingers stilled in my hair. And you will ignore all of it. You will smile. You will be agreeable. You will do whatever is required to secure his favor and, through him, protection for this house. Her grip tightened, nails pressing crescents into my scalp. Do you understand? I understood perfectly. I was a signature on a contract. A token exchanged for political goodwill. A stepdaughter traded so a real daughter could thrive. What I didn't understand yet was why. Why me specifically, when Ava was everything a king should want, beautiful, charming, trained since birth in the art of advantageous marriage. Why Archie Davison, the most powerful alpha in 3 kingdoms, had accepted a match with a girl whose own family barely acknowledged her existence. The questions sat heavy in my chest as we loaded into the carriage, but I swallowed them down. Questions were dangerous. Questions invited attention. The journey to the fortress took 6 hours through territory that grew progressively wilder, more remote. Amelie and Ava chatted throughout, discussing which nobles Ava might charm at the next season's gatherings, which alliances she might forge now that she carried the weight of a royal connection by proxy. I watched the landscape change. Cultivated fields gave way to dense forest. Smooth roads became rutted paths. The air itself seemed to thicken, charged with something ancient and predatory. When the fortress finally rose before us, it stole the breath from my lungs. Massive. Brutal. Built not for beauty but for war, its walls were dark stone streaked with centuries of rain and blood. Towers jutted toward an overcast sky like broken teeth. Torches burned in brackets even in daylight, casting everything in shades of amber and shadow. This was not a palace. This was a warning. The carriage lurched to a stop in the outer courtyard. Guards in leather and steel flanked the entrance, their faces scarred and impassive. One opened the door, and the scent hit me immediately, smoke, iron, pine, and underneath it all, something wild and electric that made my pulse quicken. Lady Shannon Duncan, a voice called. A woman emerged from the fortress entrance, tall and severe, her dark hair threaded with gray and pulled back in a warrior's knot. I am Commander Alara, head of the Alpha's Guard. You're expected in the throne hall. Amelie stepped forward, her merchant's smile already in place. Of course, we're honored to. Just the girl. Commander Alara's tone allowed no argument. Her gaze flicked to Amelie and Ava with the disinterest one might show insects. The family will wait in the guest quarters. For the first time in years, I saw uncertainty flicker across my stepmother's face. Her hand shot out, gripping my wrist with bruising force. Remember what we discussed, she hissed. Secure his favor. Whatever it takes. I pulled free and followed the commander into the fortress. The corridors were unlike any I'd imagined. No gilded excess, no delicate tapestries. These halls were functional, martial, lit by torchlight that threw dancing shadows across stone walls marked with scratches and dents, evidence of violence, of transformation, of bodies that didn't always remain human-shaped. The air thrummed with a low frequency I felt more than heard, like a heartbeat not quite my own. You'll want to keep your composure in there, Commander Alara said without looking back. The Alpha doesn't tolerate weakness, but he also doesn't tolerate false bravado. Be exactly what you are, nothing more, nothing less. What if I don't know what that is? The question escaped before I could stop it. The commander paused, glancing back with something that might have been approval. Then I'd say you're already more honest than most who enter that hall. We stopped before a set of doors easily twice my height, carved with images of wolves mid-hunt, jaws open, eyes hollow and hungry. 2 guards pulled them open in perfect synchronization, and sound rushed out, the crackle of fire, the murmur of voices, the unmistakable weight of gathered power. The throne hall stretched before me like a cavern, stone pillars rising into darkness overhead. Torches burned in iron brackets along the walls, their light painting everything in shades of gold and crimson. And at the far end, elevated on a dais of black stone, the throne. Massive. Unadorned. Built from dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, its high back crowned with sharp, angular protrusions that resembled both blade and bone. And seated upon it, draped in shadows and firelight, Archie Davison. The Alpha King was not what I expected. I had imagined broken. Diminished. A powerful man reduced by injury into something pitiable. I was wrong. He sat forward in the throne, not reclined, his posture that of a predator at rest, temporarily still but crackling with contained violence. Even seated, his presence dominated the space. Broad shoulders strained against a black shirt rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars that told stories of survival. Dark hair fell just past his collar, unkempt in a way that suggested he'd dismissed anyone who dared try to tame it. His face was all hard angles and sharp edges, a jaw that could have been carved from the same stone as his fortress, a mouth set in a line that had forgotten how to soften. But it was his eyes that stopped me mid-step. Amber. Flecked with gold and burning with an intelligence that seemed to see through flesh and bone straight down to the marrow of who you were. Those eyes tracked my approach across the hall with the focus of something that hunted for sport and survival in equal measure. The chair, I could see it now, though he dominated it, was unlike any wheeled chair I'd ever seen. More war machine than medical device, built from dark wood and reinforced with metal, its wheels large and sturdy enough to navigate rough terrain. His legs, covered in dark leather and wool, remained utterly still. The injury was real. The helplessness was not. Lady Shannon Duncan, Commander Alara announced, her voice carrying through the hall. As requested. As requested. Not as offered. Not as traded. As requested. Archie Davison leaned back slightly, his gaze never leaving mine. The hall had gone quiet, every alpha, warrior, and courtier present watching this moment with predatory interest. I could feel their assessment, their curiosity, their contempt. Then the Alpha King spoke, his voice low and resonant, carrying the kind of authority that didn't require volume. Tell me, Shannon Duncan, he said, and my name in his mouth sounded like a secret being exposed. Do you know why you're here? I thought of Amelie's grip on my wrist. Ava's satisfied smile. The gray dress and the 6-hour journey and the years of being invisible. I was told I'm here to secure your favor, I replied, keeping my voice steady. To bind our families through marriage and loyalty. Something flickered in his expression. Not quite amusement. Not quite approval. Is that what you were told? He leaned forward again, elbows resting on the arms of his throne, fingers steepled before him. And did anyone tell you that I rejected your stepsister outright? That I refused her 3 times before your stepmother offered you instead? The hall seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I demanded you by name, Shannon Duncan. His eyes burned into mine. The question is whether you're intelligent enough to wonder why. And in that moment, standing in a throne hall built of iron and blood, facing a king the world called broken, I felt something shift inside my chest. Not fear. Not submission. Recognition. This was not a punishment. This was a test. And somewhere in my stepmother's desperate calculation to be rid of me, she had made a mistake she would spend the rest of her life regretting. She had given me exactly what I needed, a king who saw me not as expendable, but as dangerous. The guards didn't escort me out. They simply stepped back, creating a corridor of steel and leather that led to a side door I hadn't noticed before. Commander Alara appeared at my elbow, her expression unreadable. The Alpha wants a private audience, she said quietly. Now. The crowd in the throne hall murmured as I was led away, their whispers following me like smoke. I caught fragments, sacrifice, broken, how long until, before the heavy door closed behind us, muffling speculation into silence. The corridor we entered was narrower, utilitarian. No torches here, only weak afternoon light filtering through arrow slits. We climbed a short flight of stone steps, my footsteps echoing against Alara's measured silence, until we reached another door, this one guarded by a single warrior whose scars suggested he'd earned his position through violence, not politics. He opened it without a word. The room beyond was not a throne room. It was a war room. Maps covered every available surface, tables, walls, even portions of the floor. Territories marked in different colors, routes traced in charcoal, positions annotated in handwriting so precise it looked like weaponry. A fire burned low in the hearth, more for light than warmth. And in the center of it all, Archie Davison sat in his war chair, studying a map of the Southern Territories with the focus of a man planning an execution. He didn't look up when I entered. Didn't acknowledge me at all. Commander Alara withdrew, the door clicking shut with a finality that made my pulse spike. For a long moment, there was only the crackle of fire and the scratch of his pen against parchment. Then, without lifting his gaze, your stepmother believes you're simple-minded. Not a question. A statement. She believes a lot of things, I replied carefully. She told my envoy that you were obedient. Quiet. Easily managed. Now he looked up, and the full force of those amber eyes hit me like a physical blow. She emphasized how little trouble you'd cause. How grateful you'd be for any scraps of attention. Heat crawled up my neck, but I held his gaze. She was trying to make a sale. Something flickered across his face, almost amusement, but harder. And you think you were the product? Weren't I? No. He set down his pen with deliberate precision. You were the prize she didn't recognize. There's a difference. My breath caught. He rolled his chair forward with a smooth, practiced motion that spoke of years adapting to the injury, not fighting it. The chair moved like an extension of him, powerful, controlled, silent. Your silence isn't weakness, Shannon Duncan. It's discipline. He stopped just close enough that I could see the scars that disappeared beneath his collar, evidence of violence that should have killed him. The way you hold yourself, still, watchful, calculating exits, that's training. Whether you know it or not. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? He tilted his head, studying me with predatory patience. Tell me about your father. The question struck like a blade between ribs. He died 6 years ago. Hunting accident. Convenient, Archie murmured. And Amelie married into your family how long before that? 8 months. Also convenient. He rolled back slightly, giving me space to breathe even as his words suffocated. Your stepsister was never an option, Shannon. I made that clear to every envoy Amelie sent. I wanted you. By name. Do you know why? I shook my head, not trusting my voice. Because 3 years ago, you were photographed at a minor court function. Background of someone else's portrait. You were 15, barely visible. His gaze never wavered. And you were watching the room the way a spymaster's daughter watches a room, cataloging threats, memorizing faces, tracking allegiances. The air left my lungs. Your father was Duncan Reed. My intelligence handler for 7 years before someone put a crossbow bolt through his throat and made it look like an accident. Archie's voice dropped, deadly quiet. He taught you things Amelie wanted buried. She kept you invisible, untrained, expendable, so no one would look too closely. Why tell me this now? My voice emerged barely above a whisper. Because the court out there believes you're a sacrifice. They believe I accepted you out of desperation, that you're disposable. He leaned forward, and I caught the scent of leather and smoke and something wild beneath. That belief will be weaponized against both of us. They'll test you. Try to break you. Use you to get to me. Then why bring me here at all? His smile was sharp as shattered glass. Because you're the only one in this entire fortress I know isn't already compromised. Everyone else has been here too long, wants too much, has too many loyalties I can't verify. His eyes burned. This isn't a marriage, Shannon. It's mutual survival. You watch for knives aimed at my back. I teach you to use the knives aimed at yours. And if I refuse? You won't. He said it with absolute certainty. Because you've spent 18 years being invisible, and I'm offering you something Amelie could never give you. What's that? The power to be dangerous. The word hung between us like a promise and a threat. Then Archie rolled back toward his maps, effectively dismissing me. Commander Alara will show you to your quarters. The binding ceremony is in 3 days. Until then, trust no one. Speak to no one. Watch everything. I should have left. Should have fled that room and its revelations. Instead, I heard myself ask, did you know my father well? Archie paused, his back still to me. When he spoke again, his voice carried something almost like regret. Well enough to know he'd be proud of the daughter who learned to hide in plain sight. A beat. And furious at the woman who made it necessary. Then Alara was there, hand on my elbow, guiding me out. The corridor seemed darker than before. Colder. As we walked, I realized my hands were trembling, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous. Recognition. For the first time in 6 years, someone had looked at me and seen not what I appeared to be, but what I'd been carved into by necessity and survival. Archie Davison hadn't chosen a bride. He'd chosen a weapon that didn't know it had been forged. And somewhere in a guest quarter below, my stepmother had no idea she'd just delivered the one thing that could destroy her. At her shame. The binding ceremony lasted 17 minutes. No flowers. No music. Just words spoken over clasped hands before a hall packed with nobles who watched like spectators at an execution. When Archie's thumb pressed against my pulse point, the traditional Alpha Bond acknowledgement, I felt the room hold its breath, waiting for me to flinch. I didn't. The feast afterward was worse. I sat elevated at the high table, displayed like a curiosity in a collection. Shannon Duncan, the girl no one wanted, now wearing the title of Alpha Queen Consort like an ill-fitting coat. Below, the court ate and drank and performed their contempt with surgical precision. 18 years old, a noble in blue silk said, her voice pitched to Carrie. Barely out of childhood. What wisdom could she possibly offer? None needed, her companion replied with a smile sharp as glass. She's not here to speak. Laughter rippled through the nearby tables. At the far end of the hall, Amelie sat draped in new finery, burgundy velvet that announced royal favor. Beside her, Ava glowed in gold, accepting congratulations from nobles who understood exactly what this alliance meant. They had been rewarded. Publicly. Generously. For delivering me. Lady Shannon, a voice said. I turned to find a wolf-lean man with silver threading his temples, his smile practiced and empty. Lord Garrett Thorne. I knew your father briefly. Before his unfortunate accident. The way he said accident made it sound like murder. You have my condolences, he continued, though his eyes held no sympathy. And my curiosity. Tell me, what does a merchant's stepdaughter know of governing alphas? Every face within earshot turned toward me. Waiting. Hungry for humiliation. I met Lord Thorne's gaze and said nothing. The silence stretched. Uncomfortable. Pointed. His smile faltered. The Queen Consort doesn't waste words on hypotheticals, Commander Alara said from behind my chair, her tone neutral but her positioning protective. Perhaps you should concern yourself with more pressing matters, Lord Thorne. Like why your northern patrols reported 3 hours late this week. His expression shuddered. A minor delay. 3 times this month, Alara noted. Minor becomes pattern. Pattern becomes problem. Thorne retreated with a shallow bow, but I caught the flash of fury in his eyes before he turned away. I filed it away. Lord Garrett Thorne, defensive, arrogant, nervous when questioned. Throughout the feast, I watched. Not like a bride, like my father's daughter. Lady Moira Blackwood, too interested in Archie's schedule, asked twice about his travel plans. Lord Cassius Vale avoided Archie's direct gaze, positioned himself near exits. Count Rowan Ashford, relaxed, confident, dangerous in his ease, either innocent or expertly guilty. My stepmother, performing gratitude while her eyes tracked everything Ava touched, calculating worth. And Ava herself, beautiful and venomous, already flirting with young lords, using my elevation to elevate herself. None of them expected me to notice. That was their first mistake. The second came when Archie rose from his seat, the hall falling silent with mechanical precision. His war chair rolled forward to the edge of the dais, and every alpha present straightened instinctively, submission coded into their bones despite their contempt for his injury. There is unrest in the Eastern Territories, Archie announced, his voice carrying without effort. Reports of organized resistance. Coordinated attacks on supply routes. I leave at dawn to address it personally. Shock rippled through the hall. He hadn't left the fortress in 2 years. In my absence, he continued, and I felt the room's attention sharpen, all court matters will be directed to Queen Consort Shannon. Her word is my word. Her decisions are final. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Lord Thorne laughed, a short, disbelieving bark. Your Majesty, surely Commander Alara or Lord Ashford would be more. Are you questioning my judgment, Lord Thorne? Archie's voice dropped to something lethal. The laughter died. No, Your Majesty. Good. Archie's gaze swept the hall, landing on each noble with predatory focus. Because anyone who mistakes the Queen Consort's youth for weakness will learn exactly how thoroughly they've miscalculated. He looked at me then, and in his eyes I saw the challenge, the test, the absolute certainty that I would either rise or shatter. The court is yours, Shannon, he said. Don't disappoint me. Then he rolled away, leaving me elevated and exposed before a hall full of nobles who smiled like wolves and waited for me to bleed. The council chamber was built for intimidation. Circular. Stone. A single throne-like chair at the head, now conspicuously empty. Around the table sat 12 nobles whose combined age and experience should have crushed an 18-year-old girl on sight. I took the seat Archie left behind. Lady Shannon, Lord Thorne began, his tone dripping false courtesy, perhaps we should postpone formal proceedings until His Majesty returns. These matters require seasoned judgment. The Alpha King's orders were clear, I replied evenly. Proceed. Silence. Then Lord Ashford cleared his throat. Very well. First matter, treasury allocation for the Eastern Garrison. Treasurer Aldrich recommends reducing funds by 30% given the current instability. I glanced at the parchment before me. Numbers in neat columns. The Eastern Garrison is where my husband currently resides addressing unrest, correct? Yes, but... And you want to reduce their funding during active conflict? I let the question hang. Treasurer Aldrich, walk me through your reasoning. The treasurer, a narrow man with ink-stained fingers, shifted uncomfortably. Simple economics, my lady. Resources are strained. We must prioritize. The Western patrols received a 40% increase last month, I interrupted, scanning the ledger Commander Alara had quietly provided that morning. Why? Precautionary measures. Against what threat? I looked up. According to military reports, the western border has been quiet for 18 months. Aldrich's face reddened. Strategic reserves. Who authorized the increase? Silence. Lord Thorne, you oversee Western territories. Did you request additional funds? Thorne's jaw tightened. Security concerns are complex. Yes or no? The allocation was appropriate. That's not an answer. I set down the ledger. Treasurer Aldrich, you're removed from fund distribution pending audit. Lord Cassius Vale will assume those duties temporarily. Shock rippled through the chamber. Aldrich sputtered, You cannot. I can. Next matter. Lady Moira Blackwood leaned forward, her smile sharp. The Queen Consort is eager to assert herself. How refreshing. She slid a document across the table. A petition from the northern noble houses requesting Lady Amelie Duncan serve as official liaison between Crown and merchants. Given her family connection. Amelie. Rewarding my stepmother with an official position that would grant her access, influence, information. I studied the petition. 15 signatures. Then checked the council attendance records from the past year. Lady Blackwood, you've missed 6 of the last 8 sessions. Her smile froze. Personal matters. Yet you're suddenly invested in administrative appointments. I looked at the other nobles. How many of you have actually met with northern merchants this quarter? Silence. Lady Blackwood, perhaps you should attend more sessions before proposing policy. Petition denied. On what grounds? Conflict of interest. Lady Duncan is my stepmother. Any official position creates complications. I met her glare calmly. Unless you're suggesting I should grant favors to family? I thought competence mattered here. The words hung like blades. For 2 more hours, they tested me. Complex trade disputes. Territorial boundary arguments. Military requisitions. Each designed to confuse, overwhelm, force mistakes. Instead, I listened. Cross-referenced. Found the patterns they assumed I'd miss. By session's end, 3 nobles had lost influence they'd held for years. And they knew it. Afterward, I walked the fortress corridors, mind racing. Commander Alara had mentioned the old intelligence archives were sealed after my father's death. Forbidden. Forgotten. I turned down a passage I'd noticed during the binding feast, narrow, poorly lit. At its end, stonework that didn't quite match. I pressed against the seam, and something clicked. Behind the false wall, darkness. Stairs descending. And the scent of old parchment. My father's secrets, waiting to be found. The hidden archive smelled of dust and secrets. I descended stone steps worn smooth by footsteps that stopped 6 years ago. At the bottom, a room no larger than a cell. Shelves carved directly into rock. Documents sealed in waterproof cases. Maps marked in cipher. And on a small desk, untouched since the day my father died, an open journal, his handwriting sharp and precise. If you're reading this, Shannon, I'm already dead. My hands shook as I turned pages. You won't remember, but I trained you. Every game we played, memorizing faces at market, counting exits in crowded rooms, repeating conversations word for word, that wasn't play. That was preparation. The world tilted. I am Duncan Reed, King's Spymaster. I handle intelligence that keeps the realm stable and Archie Davison alive. I've uncovered evidence of a succession plot, nobles who want the throne, who consider Archie's injury proof he's unfit to rule. I flipped through accompanying documents. Names I recognized from council. Lord Thorne. Lady Blackwood. Count Ashford's signature on correspondence discussing transition of power. The conspiracy reaches deeper than I can map alone. They'll kill me before I expose them. But they won't touch you, not if you remain unremarkable. So I've arranged your obscurity. Hitting you in plain sight. My chest tightened. Every year of being invisible. Every moment of being overlooked. Deliberate. Protective. Amelie Crane approached me 8 months ago, a widow seeking security. I didn't realize until too late she was their agent. Planted to watch me. To access my network. Our marriage was infiltration. The words blurred. My father knew. He married his own murderer to buy time. By the time you read this, you'll be older. Smarter. Safer. Archie knows about you, I've told him everything. If he ever calls for you, trust him. He's the only one who understands what you are. What I am. Not who. What. You are my daughter. My successor. The weapon they didn't see me forge. I sank onto the cold floor, surrounded by evidence of a life I never knew I was living. Every accident of my childhood had been architecture. My father built me into something dangerous, then hid me so thoroughly even I didn't know. Amelie didn't choose Ava over me. She tried to erase the threat she couldn't identify. A loose paper slipped from the journal, recent, the ink barely 2 weeks old. Not my father's handwriting. Archie's. Duncan's daughter arrives tomorrow. If you're reading this before I return, the Eastern unrest is not random. Cross-reference patrol delays, Western Territories, Lord Thorne, with supply route attacks. Pattern indicates coordinated ambush. Thorne is forcing me into position. My blood turned to ice. If I don't return within 7 days, assume I'm either captured or dead. Act accordingly. Trust Commander Alara. Trust yourself. You're more ready than you know. AD. 7 days. He'd been gone 5. I gathered the documents with shaking hands, my father's training crystallizing into focus. Every noble I'd questioned in council wasn't just corrupt, they were conspirators. Every manipulation attempt was reconnaissance. They weren't testing if I'd break. They were calculating when to strike. And Archie rode straight into their trap because exposing himself was the only way to expose them. I climbed back into the corridor, no longer the girl who'd descended. My father's ghost had shown me the truth. I wasn't traded. Wasn't chosen. Wasn't saved. I was activated. And somewhere in the Eastern Territories, the only person who knew what I was worth was surrounded by enemies who wanted him dead. 2 days. I had 2 days to become what my father built me to be. The hunt had begun. The messenger arrived at dawn, mud-splattered and bleeding from a shoulder wound. The eastern garrison is surrounded, he gasped before the council. Enemy forces cut supply lines 3 days ago. His Majesty's last transmission, he faltered, meeting my eyes with something like pity. No word since. The council chamber erupted. Voices overlapping, panic barely concealed beneath political posturing. We must assume the worst, Lord Thorne said, his tone carefully measured. Begin succession protocols. He's been gone 6 days, I said quietly. Everyone turned. He said 7. Your Majesty, Lady Blackwood's sympathy was performance art. Hope is admirable, but we must be realistic. The Alpha King was already compromised by his injury. Surrounded, outnumbered, cut off. She spread her hands. We should prepare. Prepare. They meant celebrate. I watched them calculate, reallocate power in real time. Count Ashford already drafting provisional governance structures. Treasurer Aldrich, still bitter from his removal, whispering urgently with minor nobles. And in the corner, Amelie stood with Ava, both dressed in mourning grey that looked freshly commissioned. My stepmother's hand rested on Ava's shoulder, positioning her like a chess piece. The young queen consort will need guidance, Amelie announced to nearby nobles. My daughter has been trained for court life. Perhaps a formal advisory position. They weren't waiting for confirmation of Archie's death. They were building his replacement. Commander Alara appeared at my elbow. We should evacuate you, she murmured. If he's gone, you're next. They'll call it grief. Make it look like illness or accident. She was right. I was a loose thread in their conspiracy. Expendable now that my purpose, legitimizing whatever came next, was served. I could run. Disappear into the provinces with whatever coin I could carry. Survive. Or I could become what my father built me to be. Alara, I said quietly, my father kept a secondary archive. Network contacts marked in cipher. I pressed a small key into her palm. 3rd shelf, left side. Names marked with red ink, those are uncorrupted. Activate them. Her eyes widened. Shannon. Do it now. Discreet messages. Tell them Duncan Reed's daughter is calling in every debt owed. I stood, and the chamber quieted. If Archie dies, this conspiracy wins. If I do nothing, I'm complicit. They'll hunt you. Then I'd better move faster. I left the council without permission, without explanation. In my chamber, I stripped away the queen consort's fine dress for leather riding clothes I'd found in the archives, my father's spare gear, tailored to fit. Boots. Knives. A sealed letter bearing Duncan Reed's personal mark. The names in the archive were scattered across 3 territories. Minor nobles. Displaced alphas. Merchants who owed my father their lives or fortunes. Some wouldn't respond. Some would betray me. But some would remember. I slipped through the fortress using servants' passages my father had mapped. Behind me, I heard boots, guards sent to escort me to safety. Translation, imprison me until they decided my fate. Outside, a horse waited where Alara said it would. I mounted, gripping the reins with hands that remembered this from childhood games that weren't games. As I rode through the gates, I saw Amelie watching from a tower window. Our eyes met across the distance. She'd thought she erased me. Instead, she'd created exactly what she feared. The Eastern Territories lay 2 days' hard ride ahead. Behind me, the fortress prepared for a funeral. I had 48 hours to dismantle a conspiracy, expose traitors, and reach Archie before the trap closed completely. The girl who was traited was gone. The spymaster's daughter rode in her place. And this time, someone would bleed for underestimating what silence could become when it learned to bite back. The first contact tried to kill me. Lord Peter Moss, minor noble marked reliable in my father's archive, greeted me with wine and smiled as I drank. I felt the poison burn before it could take hold. Thank you, childhood games of identifying bitter herbs. I spat it out, drew the knife from my boot, and pressed Duncan Reed's sealed letter against his throat. My father gave you a choice once, I said quietly. Prison or service. Read the letter. He read. His face drained of color. Inside, evidence of his embezzlement, hidden accounts, mistresses his wife didn't know about. Information Duncan Reed had held like insurance. What do you want? Moss whispered. Spread a rumor. Lord Thorne's Western patrols weren't delayed, they were repositioned. He's been starving the Eastern garrison for months, engineering vulnerability. Make sure it reaches Count Ashford by morning. Ashford is part of the conspiracy. Exactly. He doesn't know Thorne plans to claim the throne himself. I smiled without warmth. Let them eat each other. By noon, the rumor had spread through 3 territories. By evening, I'd activated 6 more contacts. Each carried a different piece of the truth, fragments designed to create paranoia, fracture alliances, make conspirators question who else had been compromised. The second night, assassins found me in a roadside inn. I'd expected them, left a decoy sleeping in my bed while I waited in the rafters. When they struck, I was already gone, but not before photographing their faces with the small camera from my father's gear. By dawn, those images reached every neutral alpha in the region with a simple message: these men work for nobles who plan to overthrow the crown. Choose your allegiance carefully. 3 territories declared for Archie within hours. On the 3rd day, I played my cruelest card. I sent word to the fortress that Ava Duncan had been secretly meeting with a rival alpha's son, scandalous, politically damaging, utterly fabricated. I included just enough detail to sound credible: times, locations, a forged letter in her handwriting. The court erupted. Amelie scrambled to defend her daughter, pulling attention and resources away from the Eastern crisis. Lords who'd supported her suddenly distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with scandal. I never touched Ava. Never had to. Her mother's ambition became her cage. Each move bought hours. Days. I slept 3 hours in 4 days, survived on dried meat and paranoia, trusted no one completely. Then, on the 4th night, exhausted and mud-covered in a safe house 20 miles from the Eastern garrison, I received a signal. A runner arrived, breathless. From Commander Ilera. Coded. I decoded it with shaking hands. Archie alive. Wounded. Siege broken from within, someone leaked garrison weak points to enemy, but also fed them false intel. Rebels fractured. Confusion buying time. Extraction underway. High casualties. King requests, are you the source? I closed my eyes, relief and terror warring in my chest. Alive. Barely. But alive. I wrote back 2 words, Duncan's daughter. Then I prepared for the hardest part. The conspirators knew someone was dismantling their plan. They knew someone had access to intelligence that should have died with my father. They'd be coming for me now. Not as a disposable queen consort, but as the weapon I'd always been. And I was ready. I rode through the fortress gates at dawn with Commander Ilera's battalion flanking me and evidence that would burn the court to ash. They weren't expecting me alive. The throne hall was already assembled, emergency council convened by Lord Thorne, no doubt to formalize succession plans. Every conspirator sat in their usual positions, comfortable and confident. Until I walked through the doors in mud-stained leathers, my father's seal around my neck, and a leather case full of treason. The hall went silent. Lady Shannon, Lord Thorne recovered first, his smile strained. "We thought you'd left us. For safety." "No, Lord Thorne. I've been hunting." I climbed the dais steps, claiming the elevated position. "Commander, secure the doors. No one leaves until this council concludes." "You have no authority," Lady Blackwood began. "I have the Alpha King's authority. And my father's evidence." I opened the case, spreading documents across the high table. 6 years ago, Duncan Reed uncovered a succession plot. He was murdered before he could expose it. By his wife, Amelie Crane Duncan. Gasps rippled through the hall. In the crowd, Amelie stood frozen, Ava pale beside her. "My stepmother was planted," I continued, my voice carrying cold and clear. "Married into my family to gain access to intelligence networks. When my father discovered the conspiracy, she arranged his hunting accident. A crossbow bolt through the throat, made to look like he startled his horse. I held up the autopsy report my father had commissioned privately. The angle was wrong for an accident. The bolt came from above. From a tree stand someone positioned deliberately." "This is absurd," Amelie's voice cracked. "Is it?" I met her eyes across the hall. "Shall we discuss the payments from Lord Thorne's accounts to a mercenary guild? The same guild that supplied the crossbow bolt? Or perhaps the correspondence where you detailed my father's daily routes?" I let the documents fall. 50 pages of evidence. Payments, letters, witness testimonies my father had collected and hidden. "The succession plot required removing the king's intelligence network first," I said. "My father was the primary target. I was collateral, kept alive only because killing a child would draw too much attention. So she made me invisible instead." Lord Ashford stood abruptly. "Even if this is true, it implicates one woman, not the 36 nobles who funded the Eastern Rebellion?" I smiled without mercy. "The ones whose financial records show irregular payments to mercenary companies? Including you, Count Ashford?" I spread the ledgers, seized from Treasurer Aldrich's hidden office during my absence. Commander Alara had been thorough. Lord Thorne coordinated troop movements. Lady Blackwood managed communications. Count Ashford handled finances. I looked at each in turn. "You engineered Archie's ambush. Cut supply lines. Surrounded him with forces you'd been secretly funding for months. You have no proof of coordination. I have your letters." I dropped the final bundle. "Correspondence between all three of you, discussing timeline, strategy, division of territories post-succession. My father intercepted and copied everything. He just died before he could use it." The hall erupted. Nobles shouting denials, accusations, scrambling to distance themselves from the named conspirators. "Mother?" Ava's voice cut through the chaos, small and broken. "Tell them it's not true." Amelie said nothing. Her silence was confirmation. "Ava Duncan," I said, and my stepsister flinched at her name. "You're not charged. You were a pawn, not a player. But you benefited from treason." I gestured to the guards. "You're stripped of courtesy title and royal association. You'll leave the capital with nothing but the clothes you're wearing. Your mother's crimes are not yours, but neither is her status." "Shannon, please," Ava reached toward me, tears streaming. "You wanted everything I had," I said quietly. "Now you'll understand what having nothing feels like." The guards escorted her out, Amelie screaming protests that died against stone walls. Then the doors opened. Archie Davison entered in his war chair, flanked by blood-stained soldiers. His shirt was torn, a bandage visible beneath. His face was haggard, marked with exhaustion and pain. but his eyes burned gold with predatory satisfaction. "I believe," he said, his voice carrying despite its roughness, "my queen consort called a trial." Someone summarize what I missed. The conspirators broke. Some tried to flee, guards caught them. Some tried to barter, Archie's expression shut them down. Some knelt and begged. None of it mattered. By noon, 12 nobles were in chains. Amelie was sentenced to execution for murder and treason. The court that had smiled at my shame now watched me in silence. And when Archie reached for my hand across the blood-stained council table, I took it, not as a rescued bride, but as an equal who'd burned the world down to bring him home. The executions happened at dawn. I didn't watch. Amelie's death wouldn't undo my father's murder or erase the year she stole. Justice wasn't revenge, it was simply closure on a chapter written in someone else's blood. Instead, I stood in the war room where Archie had first told me what I was, studying maps marked with territories that needed rebuilding, alliances that needed repair, trust that needed time. "You don't have to stay." I turned. Archie sat in the doorway, still pale beneath the bandages, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. But alive. Breathing. "Here. The conspiracy is broken," he continued. "You've fulfilled every obligation. You could leave. Start over somewhere no one knows what you've survived. Is that what you want?" "What I want," he said carefully, "and what you deserve are different things. You were 18 when they delivered you here. You should have had a choice." I crossed the room, knelt so we were eye level. I was 18 when I learned I'd been a weapon my entire life without knowing it. That my father built me for this. That silence wasn't survival, it was strategy. I met his amber gaze. "You didn't take my choice, Archie. You gave me the truth that let me make one." His hand rose, hesitant, then touched my face with a gentleness that contrasted everything about him. "And what do you choose?" "You," I said simply. "Not the throne. Not the power. You. The man who recognized what I was before I did. Who trusted me with authority that could have destroyed you. Who rode into an ambush because exposing yourself was the only way to expose them." "I'm difficult," he warned. "Bitter. Broken in ways that don't heal." "You're tactical," I corrected. "Cautious. Scarred by betrayal and smart enough not to trust easily." I smiled. "We match." Something shifted in his expression, walls coming down that I suspected few had ever seen beyond. "Shannon Duncan," he murmured, "you're going to be a problem." "Good. You need one." The coronation ceremony happened 3 days later. Not a binding. A coronation. Alpha Queen in my own right, not by marriage but by competence, by blood spilled and conspiracies dismantled, and a court that learned the hard way that silence could bite back. I stood before the throne hall in armor, not a gown. Leather and steel that spoke of function over decoration. My father's seal around my neck. Archie beside me, not behind, not ahead. Beside. The throne room looked exactly as it had that first night. Stone pillars rising into darkness. Torches burning in iron brackets, painting everything gold and crimson. The massive iron throne crowned with blade-like protrusions. And the crowd. Nobles who'd survived the purge, watching with a mixture of fear and respect that tasted like vindication. Commander Alara placed the crown, simple, unadorned, deadly sharp, on my head. "The Alpha Queen," she announced. Shannon Reed Duncan Davison. Spymaster's heir. Keeper of secrets. Queen of the realm. The hall knelt. Not because they were forced. Because they understood what happened to those who mistook silence for weakness. Archie took my hand, his grip warm and certain. "Regrets?" he murmured. I looked out at the court that had smiled at my shame, at the throne that had witnessed my humiliation, at the firelight that now reflected off armor instead of a funeral dress. Not one, I said. Because I was never traded. Never sacrificed. Never chosen by anyone but myself. I was the girl who learned to hunt in a court that taught her to disappear. The daughter who inherited her father's war before understanding it was hers to fight. The queen who rewrote every rule written to cage her. At 18, my stepmother made a choice between daughters. She was right that only one would survive. She just chose wrong about which one. The court waited for me to speak. To offer reassurance or mercy or some soft word that would make them comfortable. Instead, I smiled, sharp as the crown on my head, and said the words that would define my reign. Let's begin. The end. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. There's more coming, so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.